So super gentrification is something used to describe an area that has gone through this gentrification process and it's to the point whereby property values are extortionate. It seems as if on the scale of gentrification, it's kind of at the end of that scale in terms of the transformation it's seen. Islington did have early gentrification, and it was one of those first areas because it's so central, because of the beautiful houses that went through this process of gentrification that you see other areas going through, like Hackney. And super gentrification was just something that we used to highlight that it's at a new stage. On lower incomes, they weren't part of it, or they didn't feel part of that. They weren't able to use those new places, amenities. So the restaurants are expensive, and you know, the clothes they can't afford to buy. So whilst there was a sense of, oh, it's good for the area, there's less crime, there's more going on here, there wasn't also a sense of exclusion and not being part of that. So you're right in saying that there's kind of pros and cons to gentrification. One of the things now with this stage of, say, super gentrification is how many more people are excluded from that lifestyle. See, inequality is not benign. There are lots of negative impacts that it has, and we already heard about that in Islington. We know of that from other evidence that suggests that higher levels of inequality result in lower well-being, lower social mobility, problems of community cohesion, and anxiety, and the fear and the self-confidence levels that were affected in Islington by both the rich and the poor, in fact. So there is a real reason to be doing something about inequality, and there's those social reasons. There are economic reasons, for instance, that high levels of inequality being blamed for high levels of debt and the financial crash. So we are looking at inequality and what we can do about inequality, economic inequality. There isn't a silver bullet here. People often talk about tax. They talk about progressive tax systems, and they talk about tax avoidance, which of course is a big problem and should be dealt with. But when you look at the drivers of inequality, they can't be tackled alone from just tax. There are real strong driving factors within our labour market, within the way that our services are set up. In particular, for instance, if you take something like childcare, which can be highly regressive, does mean women can't return to work. It means that people on low incomes can't return to work because it's so expensive. So we're looking at a way of tackling inequality that deals in inequality in the way that it's perpetuated through the life course. So starting through the early years, for instance, what can we do about the childcare system? Moving into the vocational skills system and education system, what can we do about the disparities and outcomes for those living in deprived areas versus living in wealthy areas or attending private and top public schools? And what can we do within companies to address massive wage disparities between, you know, FTSE bosses and the average worker within those companies? Many multiples the wages that are earned at the top.